Is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Last fall, Montanans voted to legalize recreational marijuana. It's legal to possess it, it's legal to smoke it, but it's not yet legal to be sold on the open market until January 1st, 2022. And it's still up in the air whether that will even happen here in the state's largest county. County and municipal governments have the task of implementing legalization in their own communities. Q2's Mitch Legge brings us an update on a marijuana vote that could bar the businesses from opening in Yellowstone County.
The question of whether to allow recreational marijuana into the Yellowstone County borders and tax it at 3% will be on the November 2nd ballot, after the Yellowstone County Board of Commissioners approved 2 resolutions on Tuesday. One ballot question would ask voters whether they want to deny 7 types of marijuana businesses from setting up shop in Yellowstone County. The second question would ask if the county should tax marijuana products sold at a 3% rate. The county already has a number of medical marijuana dispensaries that have been in business since at least 2016. Local officials across the state are still trying to hammer out how to implement the sale of marijuana locally under House Bill 701, which the state legislature drafted after a legalization initiative passed statewide. Yellowstone County Board Chair, Commissioner Don Jones, said they ought to bring the issue back to the voters, since county residents passed the original initiative by a narrow margin of 1,000 votes. He also said the initiative wasn't entirely truthful about how the tax revenue would be spent.
You saw the advertisements out selling, hey, this is going to be used for trails and stuff like that. And they knew full well that there was a possibility that wasn't going to be true, but they went ahead and spent millions of dollars on that, selling it that way. So the legislature came back and said, you know what, you guys can figure out how you want to manage.
A public hearing on the 2 ballot questions will be held inside the Stillwater building coming up on August 3rd. After public comment, the commissioners will make the final decision of whether to hold the election. In Billings, Mitch Legge, MTN News.
Billings city government last week expressed its intentions to run a similar question on the ballot of whether to allow certain types of marijuana businesses inside city limits. Well, if you think the threat of COVID-19 has gone away, you may want to think again. The state of Montana reported 374 new cases of COVID last week, and tonight there's yet another death to report here in Yellowstone County. Riverstone Health says that a woman in her 90s passed away on July 3rd. She was not vaccinated and, like most of those who have died, had underlying health conditions. The death is the 7th so far this month in Yellowstone County, the 71st so far this year in the county, and the 282nd since the pandemic began. Riverstone Health is offering free walk-in vaccination clinics the rest of this week. You can find that information on our website, ktvq.com. Well, COVID cases doubled nationwide in the last week and are rising in 47 states as the dangerous Delta variant spreads across the U.S. The CDC says most of those infections are in people who have not been vaccinated.
A lot of the behavior that I think is driving spread of infection is people wanting it to be over and acting as if it's over, and really abandoning even the more modest precautions like mask wearing that would help.
Also adding to the rise in cases is that highly contagious Delta variant of the virus, which has now shown up in both Montana and Wyoming. Well, lightning over the weekend is blamed for sparking 3 fires that have burned thousands of acres in what's being called the MY complex in Musselshell County. This morning, evacuation orders for Queens Point Road were lifted. The Peterson fire, burning 12 miles south of Melstone, remains the most stubborn of those fires burning in the MY complex. Officials say the terrain doesn't allow for crews to put equipment down. So far, those fires have burned just under 28,000 acres. These are some pictures of the 4 Mile fire, a smaller fire that's now burning southwest of Boerne in both Rosebud and Bighorn counties. Bureau of Land Management reports that fire was a little over 5,000 acres as of about 1 o'clock this afternoon. Well, nowadays you can depend on satellites and sophisticated communication systems to manage wildfires or just run a national forest. That's a lot different than decades ago. But as MTN's Dennis Bragg shows us, it doesn't mean there wasn't innovation.
The Fire Call 1 exhibit at the Historical Museum in Fort Missoula first opened last summer. But with the pandemic, very few people have actually seen this fascinating time tunnel into the early days of the Forest Service in Montana.
Out here at the museum, we've got the old Slide Rock Lookout Tower that we've set up to kind of look like it did back in 1930s or so. And there's an old crank telephone in there. And just the questions that people ask, and the such an epiphany for so many people to look at that and say, I never really thought about how you would communicate with the outside world if you saw a fire back there.
Bixby has collected some of these gadgets for years. Others are on loan from the Forest Service and private collectors. It's a tale of trying anything to communicate in the backcountry, from experiments with carrier pigeons to tenuous telephone lines.
I don't know if they're actually... Hello?
Because the early days, the radios just weren't up to snuff yet. They just couldn't do the job, and especially out in the woods and in dense trees, it just didn't work well. And so to be able to get the word out as quickly as possible, you've got to get people in there quickly to put that fire out with hand tools. So speed was of the essence. And especially after the 1910 fires, when it was just really proven how important it was to get to that fire when it was small.
That legacy of the Big Burn led to innovation from some legendary characters, all committed to keeping in touch.
We had such a, from the early days, such a nice connection to the Forest Service and forest products industry. And so there were so many things, so many people right here in Missoula that were innovating new ideas. It was too small a market to really get the big boys interested. And so a lot of that early day stuff was, they had to make it themselves.
The exhibit shows the fascinating march of tech, but also gives a glimpse into that backcountry life, including journals, complete with political cartoons to pass the time. And it helps us understand it wasn't just about fighting fires, but keeping rangers and others safe.
Very true. And even for the sanity of the lookouts, they talk about that a lot, of just helping to know that somebody else is out there and you can communicate with them. Or if you're going to go fight a fire, you're not doing it on your own. You've got some help is coming.
In Missoula, Dennis Bragg, MTN News.
The Fire Call 1 exhibit is upstairs at the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula, and the time for that display has been extended through at least the end of this year. Now over to Chief Meteorologist Ed McIntosh. Ed, you've got the reports from those storms that rolled through parts of the Q2 viewing area earlier.
That's right. In the Billings area, we picked up about 507 inches of precipitation. At the airport, it was less once you started getting into the southern portion of the town, so it was really very localized, but there was quite a bit of thunder and lightning with a lot of the storms around the area as well. It was really southeastern Montana that got hit a little bit harder, especially in areas closer to around Broadus and then into the northern portion of Wyoming. And one location there around Rocky Point, just across the Montana-Wyoming state line, they picked about an inch of hail. It was small hail, but it just kept piling up like snow, and more than an inch of rainfall into Powder River County south of Broadus, with some strong winds as well. This evening we started picking up a little more hail around Gillette. This hail up to about the size of ping pong balls, and it continues to move into South Dakota. Forecast details are only a few minutes from now.
Well, new plans were announced today in the ongoing search for missing hiker Tatum Morrell. Q2's Brandon Warren fills us in.
23-year-old Tatum Morrell was last heard from on the night of July 1st. Morrell was solo hiking 5 12,000-foot peaks near Red Lodge. She was reported missing late into the night of July 5th, and after days of searching thoroughly, officials believe her to be deceased. However, the search continues. If you can recall, National Guard helicopters were used in the search, and they provided high-resolution imaging, which is helping guide the search going forward.
There's some areas that kind of are standing out that we need to get more information on. So we're in the process of getting another helicopter to come back in the area and potentially insert the ground crews around those areas, those clues, so we can search there.
These ground crews will be working between July 16th and July 18th. The crew will be 4 dog teams which will search for Morrell. The areas that they will be searching are Marker and Ship Lakes and the eastern faces of Sundance and Bowback Mountains.
We did get a report that there was someone seen near in that Dude Lake area and over by Lake Mary, a lone hiker. And so we are following up on all those every clue that we get at this point.
Officials are asking that the public avoid the area if possible on the days of July 16th, 17th, and 18th.
The dogs, the less scent that's in the area while they're actively searching, it just helps them focus a little bit better. So if possible, if there were not people in that area, that would be helpful to improve the success of the dog teams.
Going forward, search crews will continue operating in a limited capacity. In Billings, Brandon Warren, MTN News.
And officials say they will continue following every lead. The 2022 contest for Montana's new congressional seat now has 3 Democrats in the race. CORA NEUMANN, a health policy expert from BOZEMAN, announced this morning that she's launching her campaign for the new district. The 46-year-old NEUMANN ran briefly for U.S. Senate in 2020, but withdrew after Governor Steve Bullock got into that contest against Republican Senator Steve Daines. NEUMANN joins 2 other Democrats already running for the new congressional seat, State Representative Lori Bishop of Livingston and Missoula Attorney Monica Tranell. The new district's boundaries won't be drawn until later this year, but it's expected to cover most of western Montana. NEUMANN is the founder of a group called We Are Montana, which has worked to get personal protective equipment and vaccines to parts of the state during the pandemic.
Democrats win in Montana by going door to door, right, and really meeting people, and that's critical. So that's what we plan to build a strong campaign, tell our story, get out and meet people. I have a long track record of working with both Republicans and Democrats.
2 Republicans are also in the race. Former State Senator Al Olszewski of Kalispell and former Congressman and U.S. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. Ahead on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2, where would you say the best place to live is in the United States? Well, the U.S. News and World Report is out with its annual rankings and mixing it up a little bit this year. We'll take a look at that next. Then a little later, a guy who kicked the old pigskin all the way to a place in the Montana Football Hall of Fame.